And joining us now to share his assessment of the recent confirmation of charges hearing is Atty. Neri Colmenares, legal counsel for the families of the drug war victims. Good morning, Attorney. Attorney, can you hear us? I think you're on mute,
Hi, good,
sir. There we go. Good morning,
hi, good
sir. Can you
morning.
hear us?
Yes,
Yes,
good morning, Danny. Yes,
you
good morning to your viewers.
Attorney, you were at The Hague this entire past week. Is that correct? Can you give us
Yes,
your overall assessment and just give our audience here a feel of what that was like watching this pre-trial, and what was the sentiment like among especially the victims of the drug war, the families of the
yeah,
victims rather?
yes. Well, the if you're going to sum the entire confirmation of charges hearing, the main allegation of the prosecution is mainly that President Duterte committed crime against humanity during the drug war, and discussed the four elements of crime against humanity and the evidence that they're going to present in the trial, if when it goes or if it goes to trial. So basically, the prosecution discussed first, of course, the widespread and systematic attack, and that secondly, that it was an attack against the civilian population, and thirdly, that it was pursuant to a policy or an order of President Duterte, and that, of course, President Duterte had knowledge of the attack, knew about the killings that he ordered during the drug war. The entirety of the defense argument, on the other hand, mere stressed that President Duterte did not order the killings. There was no common plan to kill. President Duterte does not have a policy of killing drug suspects, and therefore he is innocent of the crime imputed on him, and that these acts of killings were random killings by rogue policemen or vigilantes, probably, that only killed the drug addicts, not on the basis of the order of the President Duterte, but on their individual discretion and the discretion of the commander or the local commander during the police operation. So those are the two major arguments by the two sides. And for me, basically, uh, I don't think the court will be convinced by the argument of the prosecution that President Duterte did not order it and that there was no policy, because I don't think the court will be convinced that all these acts were actually acts of disparate or separate individual policemen who just wanted to kill that day or that night, instead of a policy, a systematic policy with orders coming from the top. So in the end, President Duterte sort of blamed the police, the individual police, and charged them with committing these crimes, rather than admitting that he is indeed the one who ordered them, and asserted that it was this ordinary and individual policemen who decided to kill the thousands of drug suspects all over the country.
Attorney, the burden of proof lies in the prosecution, as we know.
Yes.
And one of the defense's arguments, or some analysts have been saying that the rhetoric of President Duterte is not believable. You can see that in his speeches. He does a lot of hyperbole. So when he orders, quote unquote, to kill, as you mentioned, is not a real order. And the defense has said that you cannot link such statements to the actual killing that took place. How strong was the prosecution in illustrating that this was actually directly ordered by President Duterte?
Well, yes, you're right. 2 points. First is there was an order. Is that a fact? Is there evidence of such an order? Yes, there were public statements made by President Duterte, not only to kill the drug suspects, but he encouraged the killing, in fact, by saying that don't worry about if if you're arrested or something. I'll protect you. I'll pardon you. I'll amnesty you. And thirdly, that he also not only encouraged the killings, but he also funded the killings, saying there will be rewards, 30,000 or whatever, 50,000 later on. He mentioned 1 million for high value targets. Are these evidence? Yes, of course. In an ordinary criminal case in the Philippines, that will constitute an evidence, right? If somebody says tells his neighbor, "I'll kill you," and then the next day the neighbor is dead, then of course that will be taken as an evidence against the person who uttered the order. Now, so it is not true that there was no evidence. There is an evidence, except that the defense is only contesting the meaning of the statement. What the evidence is saying, yes, yes, you have an evidence that he ordered it, but actually you took it out of context. He was just joking. It was hyperbole. So in the end, I don't think the court will be convinced that after all the speeches, it was just a joke, because he keeps on repeating it so many times, right? I mean, if you tell a joke, people laugh the first, second, and third time. So what's the point in 2 to 3, 4 years of repeating that joke? And every time he jokes, thousands are killed. So can the defense really convince the court that, yeah, thousands were killed, but it was not a result of his joke? I don't think it will be absurd for the court to say, oh well, so the killings were not really ordered by him. He was just joking. That's really the prosecution's evidence here is very strong, and escaping the evidence presented by the prosecution, mainly by saying, oh, it was not really, it wasn't really, he didn't intend it, would be a very, very weak defense. And if it was really a joke, and the moment thousands are getting killed, he should have stopped joking about it and clarified that, no, no, don't kill people. I was just joking. No, no, he didn't do that. In fact, the elements of the crime were proven when police began killing thousands of suspects all over the country in broad daylight, in front of many witnesses, in public markets, as if the perpetrators were not afraid at all of being accosted by the people, but because President Duterte assured them that nothing will happen to you. So, and then, of course, it was found, in the end, the prosecution said, look, how many did you actually investigate? You're supposed to be a person who is against crime. Isn't it a crime to kill somebody? Well, did you investigate it? No. The investigation, 52 investigations, and later on it increased to 300, but still way below a minuscule amount from the thousands killed. So that actually was the nail in the coffin, so to speak, of President Duterte's defense, when this joke was actually implemented all over the country, resulting in the death of thousands. So I don't think the court will believe that it was merely a joke.
Attorney, can you clarify whether the killings, Kaufman mentioned that the drug-related deaths actually increased after the term of President Duterte? What's the counter narrative to this?
I don't think so. Actually, the crime rate increased during President Duterte's by leaps and bounds. I mean, if you're going to have unsolved murders of 25,000 or 20,000, which is one of their statistics, unsolved homicide cases, that's a lot of killings, huh? So I don't think there's any other president with 25,000 homicides under investigation with that. Now, presuming it increased after him, but what's eh, in simple terms, ano ngayon? 'Di ba? Parang anong
He is
proof?
still charged.
Yeah, yeah. What's your problem? If Marcos began also have a very crime rate, then Marcos must be held to account. I mean,
Okay.
for us, the victims, We don't care if it's Duterte or Marcos. For us, whoever the president is, cannot just simply kill people. So even if it's true that it increased, this defense of whataboutism, this whataboutism simply means, what about him? I don't see any criminal case in the Philippines saying that he was arrested for murder and he would say, oh, there are others committing murder too. Otherwise, Danny, all these congressmen charged with corruption will get away with it. They will just
Correct.
say, oh, corruption was worse in this administration. There are others who
It's
are
a
corrupt too. So
crime is a crime.
don't imprison us. So that's very weak defense. Very
Weak.
weak defense.
Attorney, as a lawyer, no, and thinking of how the judges are going to take this, what about the defense's statements that this you cannot consider this an attack against civilians because it's clear characteristics of who these people are. He even alluded to the fact that the popularity of the president is very strong. You can even see that his daughter is the front runner for president next. You had people supporting the drug war in the country, people who considered this specific group that were being targeted as, quote unquote, the very specific people that were difficult in society, not necessarily civilians. How are the judges going to see this? Because when you say crimes against humanity, is the definition very clear there that it needed to be civilians? And does this definition of the victims already put that in place and make that a strong case?
Well, that is grasping at straws already. When that part of the defense argument is already grasping at straws. I'm
Okay.
sure Hitler was popular with the German people when he started the Third Reich, when he started the war, World War II, and he began killing people,
That's
began
correct.
killing the opposition, the Jews, the lesbians, the communists, and so on. He was popular. Does popularity absolve somebody of a crime? Many of those dictators you could claim that they're also popular, but that does not absolve them of the crime. Secondly, it is not. I think the defense sort of misrepresented the element of the crime here. If you notice, kahit pabalik-balik ta rin niya ang Rome Statute, it was the element of the crime was attack against a civilian population. The argument of the defense is, well, it's not the whole population. It's only a part of the population.
Correct.
You see, under international law, there is a division between military and combatants, and then civilians who are not part of the war. The civilians here is generic. These are not military combatants. So whether they're drug suspects or they're political prisoners, whether they're oppositionists, if a dictator says, kill all the oppositionists, kill all the opposition, they cannot just claim later on and say, well, it's not really the entire population. It was a defined target, and we call them the opposition. So, of course, all dictators kill opposition since the time of Marcos
True.
Sr., of course, during martial law. So, I don't see. Oh, he said it's not really against the whole population. It's only a defined segment of the population called drug suspects in the first place. What the element of the crime did not say whole population. In fact, in many instances of crime against humanity, it wasn't really the whole population, except you target something like Jews, for
Of
example.
course. Yeah.
On the second thing is, well, President Duterte said 3 million drug suspects, drug addicts. There are 3 million drug addicts in the Philippines. So meaning to say, if he kills 3 million drug suspects, they will say, well, it's not really the whole population. I don't think so. There is no such element in the international law in crime against humanity that you must attack the whole population for you to be guilty of crime against humanity. That is grasping at straws when Kaufman began saying, "Oh, he's very popular." Oh, yeah. Let's say, as I mentioned, Hitler was a very
Was also
popular
very
in
popular,
Germany. So,
as of course. Attorney, I just have one last question because we need to close the program, unfortunately. But the president has showed no remorse for this, and has completely said that he is innocent. He has really had a quite strong face amidst this situation. What do the the victims' families feel about this?
Yes. Well, there was a time na marami na believe sa kanya, oh, talagang tapang nito. Now, he's beginning to say, yeah, I don't feel remorseful because I didn't order it. Gawa-gawa ng mga pulis yan. Nilaglag niya mga pulis. Siyempre, the victims were very, yeah, they had to relive the experience of the killing of their kins because of the stories they heard in the court. And secondly, for President Duterte, or Kaufman for that matter, to say, well, there's small proportional population, as if the lives of their kin didn't really matter at all. They're just small statistics of 3%. They really felt hurt. And then for the defense to allege, oh, hindi kinyo naman inimbestigahan si Marcos, you don't investigate Marcos, as if that was a politically motivated filing of the case. Oh, Danny, we filed the case in 2018. We didn't even know that Marcos was going to be the president someday. So how can the Duterte say it was a Marcos instigated filing? Even President Marcos didn't know he's going to be president in 2018. When we filed the crime against humanity case before the ICC in 2018, we resorted to the ICC precisely because we couldn't file a case in the Philippines against President Duterte because he has presidential immunity. All courts in the Philippines will dismiss anything. That was a genuine search for justice by the families of the victims rather than a politically motivated kumbaga, a filing. And the victims, the kin of the victims will condemn Duterte or Marcos for human rights violations, as we did condemn the victims and us, condemn President Marcos' human rights violation last February 25 in The Hague itself, because we believe that human rights violation, whoever the president, whether it's Duterte or Marcos or anybody else, cannot be allowed at any time and in any case. So yeah, it was
And
a
need to be
genuine
held
search for
accountable.
justice, not a politically motivated filing.
Thank you so much for your time and insights there, Attorney Neri Colmenares.
Thank you so much, Danny.